Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into something that I think we've all felt at some point, the difference between real change and what you might call corporate theater. You know, when a company or a school announces some huge, grand transformation, how can you tell if it's the real deal or just an elaborate show? Well, we are going to find out, and we're going to use one really fascinating case study to do it.
So let's just dive right in with a question that I bet is going to feel super familiar. Have you ever been at work or maybe back in school and some massive new initiative gets announced and you just get this feeling that something's off? Like it feels kind of hollow, as if it's more about looking good than actually being good. And here is the secret. It's because when organizations are pushed to change, they don't just fall in line. Nope, they strategize. It's like they're playing a game of chess. They have this whole playbook of responses that can be anything from, okay, we're all in, to some really clever resistance, all while making it look like they're totally on board. To really crack this mystery of real change versus fake change, let's open up our case file. We're going to look at this huge nationwide effort to implement brand new quality standards across every single university in Turkey. I mean, it is the perfect real-world laboratory to see how organizations really react when the pressure is on. So, what was this big change all about? Well, it's something called quality management, which is basically a fancy term for a complete overhaul to make sure that everything a university does, the teaching, the research, the admin, the whole shebang, meets a really high professional standard. This whole push started back in 2015, and it was led by the Turkish Higher Education Quality Council, or THEQC for short.
Okay, but here's where it starts to get really interesting. The researchers on this found that the universities weren't just dealing with one simple push to change. Nah, they were actually caught between two totally different kinds of pressure. And this slide, it just lays out those two forces perfectly. Over on the left, you've got what the academics call normative pressure, but let's just call it the official rulebook, right? This is the top-down, these are the new rules pressure from the TOQC. But then on the right, you have mimetic pressure, which is just a fancy way of saying keeping up with the Joneses. And you know this one. It's that super powerful social pressure to just copy what all the other successful universities seem to be doing. So you have these two totally different engines trying to drive change. And that leads to the million-dollar question. Does the type of pressure actually matter? I mean, do organizations react differently when they're following a rulebook versus when they're just trying to keep up with their neighbors? That is exactly what this study wanted to find out. And let me tell you, the answer they found is absolutely fascinating. It really gets to the very heart of how genuine change happens. And honestly, it's probably not what you'd expect. All right, so first up, let's look at how the universities responded when the pressure came from that official rulebook, the professional standards set by the governing body. They actually did it. They genuinely complied. The study calls this response acquiesce. And what it meant was real, actual change on the ground. They rolled up their sleeves, they updated their systems, and they did the really hard work to meet those new standards. Okay, but what about that other pressure? What happened when the big motivation was just to copy the other successful schools? Basically to look good and feel safe. You guessed it. They gamed the system. The study has a name for this response too, and it's manipulate. And this wasn't about real substance at all. It was all about appearance. They created this illusion of change, making a bunch of superficial tweaks so it looked like they were keeping up, but without doing any of the real, deep work. And this table right here just boils it all down perfectly. Pressure from the official rulebook led to real, genuine compliance. But that pressure from keeping up with the Joneses, that led straight to manipulation. You've got two different kinds of pressure leading to two wildly different results. Now, look, this wasn't just a hunch the researchers had. They used some pretty sophisticated statistical models to measure all this, and believe me, the numbers don't lie. The story they tell is crystal clear. The researchers actually calculated an impact score to show how strong the connection was. For the official rulebook leading to genuine change, that score was a positive 0.506. So, for any stats people watching, you know that's a really strong, significant connection. For the rest of us, it's just the hard data that proves it. Clear, professional standards are what drive real, authentic change. It's not just a theory, it's a fact. So what about the other side of the coin?
Well, the impact score linking that keeping up with the Joneses' pressure to gaming the system came in at a positive 0.390. And yet, that is also a really powerful statistical link. It proves that the pressure to just copy your peers is a direct driver of superficial change. It literally encourages organizations to put on a show instead of doing the actual work. It's incredible.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second. What does all of this mean for you and me? Because this isn't just a story about universities in Turkey. It is a powerful, powerful lesson for any large organization, whether it's a giant corporation or a government agency.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? The study proves it beyond a doubt. If you want authentic, large-scale change, you have to have a clear rulebook. When leaders just point at a competitor and say, just do what they're doing, they are basically asking their organization to just go through the motions. Real, lasting change is driven by clear standards, not by imitation.
And that leaves us with one final, really powerful thought. The next time a big change initiative lands on your desk or is announced in an all-hands meeting, you now have the tools to look a little deeper. You can ask that critical question: is this whole thing designed for genuine transformation, or is it just for show?